The photograph they showed the courtroom was taken on a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because I remember that Tuesday. I had a 7 o'clock call with our Singapore distributor, which I took from the car in a parking garage because the office reception was poor. I had a lunch meeting that ran long. I picked up Lily from school at 4 because Sarah had an appointment and I'd said I would handle it, which I remember because Lily wanted to stop for ice cream, and I said yes even though we were already late for dinner. That Tuesday existed in my memory as a complete and ordinary day. According to the photograph, a grainy image captured, supposedly, by a private investigator outside a hotel I had never entered. I had spent part of that same Tuesday afternoon in the company of a woman I had never met. My attorney pointed this out to the court. The other side's attorney pointed out that memory is unreliable and photographs are not. The judge looked at the photograph. Then she looked at me. I had been looking at that expression, patient, evaluating, not yet decided for 3 days of proceedings, and I had learned to read nothing certain into it, which my attorney said was a good sign and which felt, from where I was sitting, like no sign at all. My daughter was in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was not allowed in. She was 7, and courtrooms are not designed for 7-year-olds, and there was a woman from a family services organization sitting with her. A kind woman named Patricia who had told me she would take good care of Lily while I was inside. I thought about Lily constantly during those 3 days, not strategically, not in terms of custody arrangements or legal outcomes, just the specific physical fact of her, the way she smelled after a bath, the gap in her teeth where she'd lost the first one and the second was coming in slightly crooked. The drawings she made at the kitchen table with her tongue pressed between her lips in concentration. I had built a company worth $40 million. I had done it from a garage, with 2 employees and a business plan that 3 separate investors had told me was unworkable. Over the course of 8 years that required more of me than I had known I had to give. None of that was what I thought about, sitting in that courtroom. I thought about my daughter in the hallway. I thought about the Tuesday that had been taken from my own memory and replaced with something else. And I thought about how, 14 months earlier, on the night of my 10th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 200 people who loved us, I had believed completely, without reservation, that my life was exactly what it appeared to be. To explain how wrong I was, I have to go back to the beginning. I met Sarah at 24. She was working for a nonprofit, grant writing, in an office 4 blocks from the coffee shop, where I was trying to turn a business idea into something that could survive contact with reality. We were introduced through a mutual friend at a dinner party, the kind of dinner party that exists primarily as infrastructure for other things to happen. And we talked for 3 hours in a corner of someone's living room about nothing in particular and everything that mattered. She was intelligent in a way that was hard to keep up with and exhilarating to try. She asked questions that assumed you were worth asking. She had opinions she held firmly and changed when the argument was good enough, which I found rare and attractive. We were together for 2 years before I proposed. I proposed in the coffee shop where I'd been working when we met. It was closed. I'd asked the owner, who was a friend by then, if I could have it for an hour. Just the 2 of us and the space where I'd spent most of my 20s trying to build something worth building. She said yes before I finished the question. We were married the following spring. Mark was my best man. I need to tell you about Mark, because you need to understand what 15 years of friendship looks like before I tell you what it looks like when it ends. We met in college. Freshman year, same dormitory floor, assigned to adjacent rooms by whatever algorithm the university used to determine proximity. He was from Ohio. I was from Portland. We had nothing obvious in common, except the particular loneliness of being somewhere new and the willingness to do something about it. We became the kind of friends that happen when you're young and everything is new, and you don't yet know which parts of yourself are permanent, the kind that forms in the absence of history and ends up becoming history. By senior year, we had the shorthand of people who have been through things together, the same references, the same way of talking about certain subjects that only make sense to the 2 people involved. When I started the company, Mark was the first person I called. He left his job within the month. We built it together, not equally the way founding myths sometimes claim, but genuinely in the way that two people with different skills and the same commitment can build something that neither could have built alone. I was the product, the vision, the external face. Mark was operations, systems, the internal architecture that made the vision survivable. For 8 years, I trusted him with everything. The company, my marriage, my daughter, my fears about all three. I trusted him the way you trust someone, when you have no reason not to and a decade and a half of reasons to. That's the part that matters. That's the part I need you to hold on to, while I tell you what came next. Lily was born in the 7th year of our marriage. I was in the delivery room. I have a specific memory, not the birth itself, which was long and difficult and frightening in ways I hadn't been prepared for, but the moment afterward, when the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, and I looked down at this person who had not existed 8 minutes earlier and understood, with a clarity I had not experienced before or since, that I would do anything for her. Not a feeling, a fact. A rearrangement of priorities so complete and immediate that it felt like a different person had been standing in that room before, and I had just arrived to replace him. Sarah, exhausted and pale in the hospital bed, watched me hold Lily and smile. "She has your ears," she said. "Poor kid," I said. Sarah laughed. I thought, standing there in the delivery room with my daughter in my arms, that I was the luckiest person I knew. The anniversary party was Sarah's idea. 10 years, she said. "That's significant. We should do something significant." I agreed. I was happy to agree. 10 years felt like something worth celebrating. The marriage, yes, but also the company, which had grown into something I hadn't quite allowed myself to imagine in those early garage years, and the family we had built around it, and the friends who had been part of all of it. We rented a ballroom, 200 guests, a band Sarah had discovered at someone else's wedding and liked enough to track down. The guest list was a cross-section of our lives: employees, investors, old friends, family, the ecosystem of relationships that accumulates over a decade of building things. I wore the same suit I'd worn to our wedding, which still fit, which Sarah had found funny. "Optimistic," she said, watching me get dressed. "Delusional," I said. She laughed. I remember that laugh, the specificity of it. The way she was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, in the dress she'd chosen weeks earlier, her hair done, looking beautiful in the particular way she had always been beautiful, composed, deliberate, everything exactly as intended. I remember thinking, 10 years and I still notice. I remember being grateful. The evening went the way well-planned evenings go. Dinner, speeches from people we love, toasts that were funny and warm and slightly embarrassing in the ways that toasts at milestone events tend to be. The band was excellent. The room was full of the specific energy of people who are genuinely happy to be somewhere, which is rarer than it sounds, and which I noticed because I was the kind of person who noticed things like that. Mark gave a toast. I need to tell you what that was like, because it matters. He stood at the microphone and talked about the company, the garage, the early investors, the near collapses that had somehow not become actual collapses. And then he talked about me, and about Sarah, and about what it meant to watch two people build a life together for 10 years. He was funny, he was warm, he meant none of it. I did not know that then. Standing in that ballroom, I felt the way you feel when the people you love say the things you most want to hear. Grateful, seen, slightly embarrassed, fundamentally happy. I raised my glass. I thanked him. After the toasts, after the dancing, toward the end of the evening when things had softened into that late party warmth, Sarah asked for the microphone. I was at the bar. I turned when I heard her voice through the speakers. She was standing at the front of the room. She looked from where I was standing, exactly as she'd looked all evening. Composed, deliberate, everything exactly as intended. "I want to say something," she said, "about my husband." People turned, smiling, anticipatory. The room expecting warmth, as rooms at anniversary parties expect warmth. "I want to say something," she said again, "that I should have said a long time ago." And the room changed. Not dramatically, not all at once. A slight shift in quality, the smile not quite reaching her eyes, the particular stillness of someone who is about to deliver something they have been carrying for a long time. "I know about the affair, David." The room went quiet in the specific way that 200 people go quiet when they hear something they cannot immediately process. I set down my glass. The screen behind her, the same screen that had been showing photographs of our life together all evening. The wedding, Lily's birth, company milestones, changed. Hotel, exterior photograph. A man from behind, entering a revolving door. The shape of shoulders I recognized, though the face was not visible. A restaurant, a corner table, a man and a woman. The man's face partly turned away, but the suit, my suit, the gray one I wore on Tuesdays when I had investor meetings, was visible. A private investigator's report. Pages of it, on the screen, too small to read from a distance but absolutely legible as a document. As evidence. "I have been trying to protect our family," Sarah said. "I have been trying to protect Lily, but I can't do it anymore." 200 people were looking at me. I opened my mouth. I did not know what to say, because there was nothing to say, because what was happening was not possible, because the photographs on the screen depicted events that had not occurred and a man I had not been. Mark stepped forward. He came to stand beside Sarah. He put his hand on her shoulder, and he looked out at the room, at the employees and investors and friends and family, and he said, "I'm sorry, David. I tried to tell you. I tried to handle this privately. But Sarah deserves the truth." The room was completely silent. I looked at Mark. 15 years. The dormitory floor. The garage. The wedding. Lily's birth. I looked at the man who had been my best friend for 15 years, standing beside my wife, his hand on her shoulder, his face arranged into an expression of reluctant, sorrowful honesty. And I understood, in the specific way that you understand something that your mind immediately tries to reject, that something had been happening for a very long time that I had not seen. I still didn't know what it was. I only knew that whatever it was, it had been planned. The room had started to murmur. Someone near the back said something I couldn't hear. An investor, a man named Gerald who had been with us since year 2, was looking at me with an expression I had never seen him wear, something between disappointment and calculation. I walked toward the exit, not running, walking, because I was 38 years old and I had built something from nothing, and I was not going to run out of my own anniversary party in front of 200 people. I pushed through the door. The hallway was empty and very quiet. I stood there for a moment. Then I called my attorney. The next 30 days happened with the specific, grinding efficiency of something that had been planned in advance, which, I would later understand, it had. The media story broke within 48 hours. A gossip site first, then a business publication, then the aggregators who treat other people's disasters as content. Tech CEO cheating scandal. Photographs that I had never taken, in a hotel I had never entered. On a Tuesday I remembered completely. My name, my face, my company. I watched it from a hotel room. I had moved out of the house immediately, not because I was asked to, but because staying felt like accepting something I had not agreed to. On a laptop I'd taken because it was the nearest thing when I left. The board called an emergency meeting on day 4. I attended. Gerald spoke first, which meant the outcome had been decided before the meeting began, because Gerald spoke first at meetings when consensus had already been reached and the meeting was formality. He said the board had a responsibility to the company's stability. He said the situation had created uncertainty among investors and partners. He said the board was recommending a temporary suspension of my CEO role pending resolution of the personal matter. Mark would serve as acting CEO. Mark, who was sitting across the table, expressed reluctance. I watched him express reluctance for approximately 4 seconds before I understood that I was watching a performance, and that the performance had been rehearsed, and that the audience for it was the board members who did not yet know they were watching a performance. I said what my attorney had told me to say, which was very little. I left the building. I had founded that company at 26. I had built it for 8 years. I had walked through those doors every working day for most of my adult life. I walked out of them that afternoon and took a car to a hotel room and sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. My phone rang. Lily on Sarah's phone, her voice small and confused. "Daddy, where are you?" "I'm staying somewhere for a little while, Bug. Just for a bit. When are you coming home?" I looked at the wall. "Soon," I said. "I promise, very soon." She was quiet for a moment. Then, Daddy, I found something on my tablet. I forgot to show you. We'll look at it when I see you, okay? When can I see you? Mommy says, a pause. Mommy says she'll ask the lawyer. The lawyer. My 7-year-old daughter. Using the word lawyer about when she could see her father. Okay, Bug, I said. I love you. I love you too, Daddy. The call ended. I sat in the hotel room. Outside, the city continued in its ordinary way, indifferent to the specific and total collapse of a life that had appeared 30 days ago to be exactly what it was supposed to be. My attorney called at 9 that evening. How bad? I said. A pause that was its own kind of answer. The evidence is constructed well, he said. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The photographs are credible. The investigator is credible. The financial documents they've introduced, there are transactions we need to explain that are going to be difficult to explain. He paused again. David, I need you to understand where we are. Right now, if this went to trial next week, I think we lose. I looked at the wall. Then we don't let it go to trial next week, I said. No, he said. We don't. The line was quiet for a moment. Start from the beginning, I said. Everything, the woman in the photographs, the investigator, the financial documents, every piece of what they've built. I want to look at all of it. David, I built a $40 million company by understanding problems better than anyone else in the room, I said. This is a problem. Let me understand it. A pause. All right, he said. I got off the bed. I opened the laptop, and I started from the beginning. The woman in the photographs was named Claire Donovan. It took me 4 days to find her, which felt slow until I understood that finding her was meant to be easy. That was the first thing that didn't sit right, not the finding, but the ease of it. She wasn't hidden. She had a LinkedIn profile, a professional headshot, a listed employer that turned out to be a consulting firm that had done minor work for a competitor of ours 2 years ago. She had been placed where I could find her, which meant she was meant to be found. I thought about that for a long time before I made contact. My attorney's investigator reached her on a Wednesday afternoon. The meeting was brief. She was guarded in the way of someone who has been told to expect contact and has been given instructions about how to handle it. She confirmed nothing. She denied nothing. She sat across a coffee shop table and gave the specific non-answers of someone who has been coached. But there was a moment, a single, brief, unguarded moment, when the investigator asked a question she hadn't been prepared for, when something moved across her face. Discomfort, not the discomfort of being falsely accused. The other kind. The kind that comes from being asked to look directly at something you've been trying not to look at. She had been paid. We couldn't prove it yet, but she had been paid, and she knew it, and she knew we knew it, and the only question was whether that knowledge would eventually become something we could use. My attorney said, not yet. I said, then what? He said, follow the money. The financial documents Sarah's team had introduced were sophisticated, not in the way that sophisticated things are usually sophisticated, not elegant, not minimalist, but in the way of something that has been built by someone who understands exactly what an auditor looks for and has been careful to be almost everything except that. Almost. I spent 3 days going through them with my CFO, who had stayed loyal, for which I would be grateful for the rest of my life, and a forensic accountant my attorney had retained. We worked in a conference room in my attorney's office, which had become my de facto headquarters, with coffee going cold and takeout containers accumulating in the corner, and the particular focused silence of people who are looking for something specific in a very large amount of data. We found the thread on the second day, a series of transactions, small enough individually to appear routine, large enough collectively to matter, moving through a shell structure that had been established 14 months before my anniversary party. 14 months. While Sarah had been planning our 10th anniversary celebration, she had also been establishing the financial architecture of what came after it. I sat with that number for a while. 14 months of planning. 14 months of sitting across from me at the dinner table and asking about my day and putting Lily to bed and building something in the dark that was designed to take everything I had. My CFO, who had known us both for 6 years, looked at the documents and then looked at me and said nothing for a long moment. How long do you think? I said. Based on the structure, he paused. The shell company was incorporated 16 months ago, but the planning for something like this, the depth of it, you don't build this in a month. No, I said, you don't. I thought about Sarah, in the doorway of our bedroom. Optimistic, she had said, watching me put on my wedding suit. She had known, standing in that doorway, what the evening was going to become. I tried to feel something about that. Mostly I felt cold. The romantic component of the conspiracy was the last piece, and also the most obvious one in retrospect, which is the way these things tend to work. The truth that should have been apparent only becomes apparent after you've found everything else. It was my CFO who found it, actually. Not the relationship itself. That emerged from a different source. A hotel loyalty program that had been billed to a credit card that existed in a name neither Sarah nor Mark used professionally, which my investigator found because he was good at his job, and because people who believe they have covered their tracks rarely cover all of them. What my CFO found was the timeline. The shell company, incorporated 16 months ago, had a second authorized signatory, not Sarah, a name that meant nothing until you looked at it against the hotel records. Against the phone records my investigator had been able to obtain through legitimate channels. Against the pattern of business trips, conferences, and off-site meetings that, when plotted on a calendar, resolved into a picture that was completely clear and completely devastating. Mark and Sarah had been together for at least 3 years, possibly longer. The affair they had accused me of, the photographs, the investigator's report, the hotel visits, was a mirror. A precise, carefully constructed reflection of something that had actually occurred, with the names changed. I had been accused of exactly what they had been doing. I sat in my attorney's conference room with this information and did not move for approximately 5 minutes. My attorney gave me the time. Then he said, "We have the timeline. We have the financial connection. We have the hotel records. What we don't have is something that links all of it in a way that a judge will accept as definitive rather than circumstantial. We have enough to imply," I said. "Implication isn't proof. Then what do we need?" He was quiet for a moment. Something that puts them in the same room, saying what they actually intended. I looked at the table. "That doesn't exist," I said. "As far as we know," he said carefully. Lily mentioned the tablet for the 3rd time on a Sunday. I had visitation on Sundays. 2 hours, supervised, at a neutral location that a family services coordinator had selected, which was a community center with a room that had been painted a cheerful yellow that nobody in it ever felt. She came in with her backpack, the way she always did, and she sat across from me at the low table, and we did the things we did on Sundays: drawing, card games, the deliberate construction of 2 hours that felt as normal as possible under circumstances that were not normal at all. Halfway through the 2nd hour, she pulled out the tablet. It was an older one, a children's model I'd bought her 2 birthdays ago, in a pink case she'd decorated with stickers of animals she liked. "Daddy," she said, "I keep forgetting to show you. I found something." "What did you find, Bug?" She frowned at the tablet, navigating the way 7-year-olds navigate devices, with complete confidence and no particular method. "It was from before, when I was playing my game." "What kind of something?" "People talking." She looked up. "It was boring, so I didn't watch it, but I thought you might want it because it had your name." The family services coordinator was in the corner of the room, doing something on her own phone, not particularly engaged. I looked at the tablet in Lily's hands. "Can I see?" I said. "I can't find it right now," she said, still scrolling. "It was in a folder. I'll find it at home." "Okay," I said. "Next Sunday, show me." She nodded and put the tablet away and picked up her colored pencils, and the conversation ended the way conversations with 7-year-olds end. Completely, immediately, replaced by whatever came next. I sat across from my daughter and watched her draw and thought about the word boring. I thought about what a 7-year-old who was playing a game on a tablet might consider boring. I thought about what might have been recorded, accidentally, by a child's tablet propped on a surface somewhere in my house during the 14 months when things were being planned. I did not sleep well that Sunday night. The trial began on a Thursday. Sarah's attorney was good, the expensive kind of good, the kind that comes from years of high-stakes cases and produces a particular bearing in a courtroom. a combination of command and apparent reasonableness that is very difficult to counter directly. Mark was listed as a witness. He arrived each morning in a suit that was slightly too new, which I noticed because I had known him for 15 years, and I knew what his clothes looked like when he was performing versus when he was himself. He sat in the gallery when he wasn't on the stand and looked at me with an expression of careful regret that I recognized from the anniversary party, and that made me tired in a way that went below anger. By the end of the second day, I could see my attorney recalibrating, not panicking. He was too experienced for panic, but the small adjustments, the way he paused slightly longer before responding, the way he reviewed his notes during recesses with a focused intensity that hadn't been there on day one, told me what I needed to know about where we stood. The photographs were credible. The investigator was credible. The financial documents had been constructed to explain away exactly the anomalies we had found. We had circumstantial evidence of a conspiracy. We had a timeline that implied a relationship. We had a shell company with 2 signatories and hotel records that suggested what they suggested. What we did not have was the room. On the evening of the second day, I sat in my attorney's car in the courthouse parking garage, and he told me what I already knew. "Tomorrow is the last day of testimony," he said. "If something doesn't change tonight—" "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, David. Don't apologize yet." I called Lily that evening. Sarah answered, which she was required to do under the visitation terms. "Lily wants to talk to you," she said, her voice entirely neutral, the voice of someone performing cooperation. Lily came on the line. "Daddy, I found it," she said immediately. "The video, I found the folder." I sat very still. "The one with people talking," I said, "with my name." "Yes," a pause. "There's a lot of them actually, like a lot. Lily," I kept my voice completely calm. "I need you to do something for me, okay? Don't delete anything. Don't touch the folder. Just leave everything exactly where it is." "I wasn't going to delete it," she said, mildly affronted. "I was going to show you." "I know, Bug. Can Patricia bring the tablet tomorrow, to the courthouse?" "Why are you at the courthouse?" "It's a work thing. Can Patricia bring it?" A pause, then, "I'll ask her." I called Patricia next. Then I called my attorney. Patricia brought the tablet at 8:15 the next morning. I took it into a conference room with my attorney and a digital forensic specialist he had reached the previous evening, a woman named Dr. Chen, who had driven 2 hours and arrived with coffee and a laptop and the alert, focused energy of someone who has been called in on short notice before and knows how to work quickly. The folder contained 43 video files. The tablet, when propped on a surface, which a child playing a game will do routinely, without thinking, because it's convenient, had a front-facing camera that recorded when certain applications were open. A feature intended for video calls that Lily had never disabled, that no adult in the house had thought about. She had propped it on the kitchen counter, on the bookshelf in the living room, on her bedside table, when she'd brought it to listen to music at night. In the hallway, once, while she'd been sitting on the floor playing a game, and the adults in the kitchen had been talking. Dr. Chen reviewed the files systematically, efficiently, without visible reaction, until she reached file 31. She stopped. She adjusted her headphones. She listened for approximately 4 minutes. Then she turned the laptop so we could see the waveform and said, very quietly, "You need to hear this." The courtroom that afternoon was the same courtroom it had been for 3 days. The same judge, the same gallery, the same careful architecture of competing narratives. My attorney requested permission to introduce new evidence. Sarah's attorney objected. The judge looked at the documentation Dr. Chen had prepared: chain of custody, authentication analysis, technical verification of the recording's integrity, and listened to my attorney's argument, which was precise and took 9 minutes. Then she overruled the objection. The recording was played through the courtroom's audio system. The quality was imperfect. Ambient noise, the occasional sound of a child's game in the background, the acoustic distortion of a room recorded by a tablet on a shelf. But the voices were clear. They had been speaking at normal volume in what they believed was a private conversation, with no awareness that anything was listening. Sarah's voice first, discussing the photographs. The investigator she had hired. The specific Tuesday that had been chosen because David had a full calendar and multiple witnesses to his actual whereabouts that could be strategically mudded. Mark's voice, the shell company, the board strategy, the timeline for the custody petition. Sarah again. The name Claire Donovan. A payment amount. Instructions about what Claire was to say if contacted. Then a sentence that Dr. Chen had flagged separately, because it was the one that closed every remaining gap. Mark's voice, very clearly. After the board meeting, it's done. He won't be able to come back from this. The company is ours. The courtroom was silent. Not the silence of an audience waiting for what comes next. The silence of 200 people who have just understood something simultaneously. I looked at Sarah. She was looking at the table in front of her. Her attorney had leaned in and was speaking quietly, but whatever he was saying was not reaching her. She had the specific stillness of someone who has built an elaborate structure and is watching it come down, not in pieces, but all at once, the way buildings come down when the foundation goes. I looked at Mark. He was looking at me. For the first time since the anniversary party, the performance had left his face. What was underneath? It was not what I expected. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was something smaller than guilt and larger than shame. The expression of someone who has arrived somewhere they understood, intellectually, they might arrive, and who is discovering that the intellectual understanding was entirely inadequate preparation for the actual experience. The judge was speaking. I heard my name. I heard my attorney's voice beside me, low and steady. David, look at me. It's done. The charges against me were dismissed before the end of the day. The judge referred the matter to the district attorney's office, along with a summary of the recording's contents and Dr. Chen's authentication report. Sarah's attorney withdrew from the case by the following morning. Mark retained a criminal defense specialist within 24 hours. The board reconvened 4 days later. Gerald, who had been the one to facilitate my suspension, was notably quiet. The vote to restore my position was unanimous, which was the kind of unanimity that occurs when people who made a mistake are given the opportunity to correct it before the correction is forced. I returned to the building on a Tuesday. The same parking structure, the same elevator, the same glass doors. My assistant, who had called me 3 times during the preceding months just to ask how I was doing, which I had not forgotten, was at her desk when I came in. She stood up. She didn't say anything. She just stood up. I nodded. I went to my office and closed the door and stood at the window for a moment, looking at the city that had continued in its ordinary way through all of it. And I thought about a garage and a business plan that 3 investors had called unworkable, and 8 years of doing it anyway. Then I sat down. I opened my laptop. I started working. The legal proceedings against Sarah and Mark continued for 14 months. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, financial crimes related to the shell company and the misappropriated funds. The district attorney's office was thorough in the way that offices are thorough when the evidence has been handed to them fully authenticated, and the defendants had, on a recording, described their own conduct in complete and admissible detail. Sarah received a sentence that the judge described as reflecting the premeditation and scope of the scheme. Mark received a comparable sentence and lost his professional licenses. Claire Donovan cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced charge. She had been paid, as I'd suspected. She had been more afraid of the people paying her than of the consequences of what she was doing, which I understood even as I did not forgive it. I did not attend either sentencing. I had Lily that week. That was where I wanted to be. The custody arrangement, once the fraud findings were established, was revised substantially. Primary custody was granted to me. I will not pretend that I felt nothing when the judge said this. I will not perform the equanimity of a man for whom the outcome was simply logical, and not also the thing he had wanted most for 14 months. I sat in a courtroom chair and heard those words and kept my face still, and my hands flat on the table, and my breathing steady because Lily was in the hallway, and I needed to be the person she walked into when Patricia opened the door. She came in and looked at me and said, "Daddy, can we go home now?" "Yes," I said, "we can go home. Our home. Our home." She took my hand. We walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon, and I drove us to the house that had been my house and was now ours. And Lily went immediately to the kitchen table with her backpack and took out her pencils and began drawing with the focused concentration that meant she was engaged with something real. I made dinner. We ate together. Afterward, I washed the dishes and Lily stayed at the table with her drawing. And the kitchen was quiet in the particular way of a place that has had noise taken away from it and is learning to be a home again. Months passed. Not quickly, months with Lily don't pass quickly, because she is at an age where every week contains something new, something she learned or said or discovered that she immediately needed to share, and I was not going to miss any of it. The company recovered, not without effort. Some clients had left during the uncertainty, some investors had rebalanced, and the work of rebuilding trust inside an organization that has watched its founder be publicly accused and then publicly vindicated is not simple or fast. But it was work I knew how to do. Work I had done before in different forms, from a garage with 2 employees, and a plan that 3 people had told me was unworkable. I rebuilt. On a Sunday evening in November, Lily was at the kitchen table. She had her colored pencils spread in the particular radiating pattern she used when she was working on something she considered important, all of them accessible, organized by some internal logic that was entirely her own. I sat down across from her with coffee. "What are you making?" I said. She looked up briefly. "Our family." I watched her work for a while. She drew with the full attention of someone who is not yet self-conscious about art, who makes lines because the lines describe what she sees, and not because she is worried about whether they are good lines. When she sat back to look at what she'd made, I leaned forward. 2 figures, a tall one and a short one, holding hands, in front of a house that had a garden and a window with light in it. Just the 2 of us. "That's you and me," she said, pointing to each figure with her pencil. "I see that," I said. She looked at the drawing for a moment, with the evaluating expression she wore when she was deciding if something was finished. Then she smiled. "Now it's the right family," she said. I looked at the drawing. 2 figures, a house, a window with light, everything that mattered, exactly as it was. "Yeah," I said, "it is. My wife tried to take my company. My best friend tried to take my future. They planned it for over a year. They built it carefully. They used everything they knew about me, my trust, my loyalty, the specific architecture of the life I had built, to construct something designed to take all of it away. And they almost succeeded. What they hadn't accounted for was a 7-year-old girl with a tablet in a pink sticker-covered case, propped on a kitchen shelf while she played her game, recording the things that adults say when they believe no one is listening. The truth only needs one person brave enough to tell it. In my case, that person was 7 years old. She didn't know she was saving me. She just forgot to show me something, and in the end, that was enough.